I'm going to talk a little bit at a high level about some of the metrics. I'm glad to send you the slides or the worksheet, whatever you'd like to help you do it. Number of employees. And one of the biggest metrics that will really help you and guide you is sales per employee. It used to be if you could make $20,000 in sales per employee per month, you could make a profit. That's not true anymore. So if you have 5 people and you're not selling at least $100,000, you're probably not making a profit. I have seen numbers as high as $40,000 and $50,000 per employee per month. But it's an important metric and a good one to benchmark against your peers on. Average daily sales. I was talking to somebody this week about average daily sales because they're talking about their budget month to month to month to month. Now, if you're fairly small, it doesn't really matter, or it's less critical. But it doesn't make a lot of sense to think about every month being exactly the same. February may only have 18 working days in it, or 19, and July may have 24. Well, if you're selling $250,000 a month, over $10,000 a day, and you're 3 days short, this month's not going to be the same as last month. And if this is a long month, it's going to be more than last month. So you have to think about normalizing that data, at least in your head, if not on the sheet. Net sales of brokered parts. Oftentimes what I see is yards that are brokering a lot of parts, their mix is changing and they don't realize it. Jim Counts likes to say, and I like the saying, we don't buy cars, we buy sales. Stop and think about that. We don't really buy cars, we buy sales. Because the cars produce the sales. Some cars produce more sales than others, and quicker sales than others. But if you don't buy enough cars, your sales may not even come down very much because you just broker more parts. Is there anybody in the room that loves brokering parts? I didn't think so. Brokering parts are a pain in the butt. But we all do it. And to some extent, for some of us it's a big part of our business, for others it's not. But you need to understand, did you broker 20% of your sales or 40% of your sales? And if it was 20, and then it was 21, and then it's 22, and then it's 23, and then it's 24, and then it's 25 in a 5-month period, you have a problem. You're not buying enough cars, so your people are brokering more parts. And intuitively, you know if you broker more parts, your margins are going to be higher on brokered parts. Net sales, new and rebuilt parts, that's usually a pretty small number. Dollars of extended warranty sales, it's easy to hit 10% here. And again, you know, I told you earlier the metric of selling $1 million a month in warranties. That's a pretty powerful number. It's a lot of money to go buy cars with. Cores, crush, and metal sales. This is funny. In the prior presentation, I talked about how if LKQ was going to buy you, what they might be willing to pay or how they're going to figure your earnings. They'll allow you to recast your earnings. They know that sometimes there's some leakage. Sometimes we mean to put all the money in the bank, but every now and then some of it doesn't always get to the bank. They know that, okay? They also know that cores should be at least 5% of your sales. So when you try to tell them that, well, yeah, but really, they know. And not only that, but they can measure, they can measure whether or not there's any theft within the stores, either theirs or the ones they're buying, based on core sales, because that tends to be where people steal from. It's an interesting metric in the self-service side of Schnitzer. One of the earlier metrics that they came up with, it still blows my mind. They could tell whether a store manager was stealing cash because they knew based on the Coke machine. So here's the metric. How many Cokes they sell is directly related to how many customers they have, and how many customers they have is directly related to how many sales they have because they know what they should sell per customer. And when you have enough facilities and this number gets big enough, when they don't buy enough Cokes, it's because they know that what the sales should be relative to how many Cokes were sold and relative to the admissions. And so if the sales number is not right, the manager's stealing money usually. And so they dive in and they audit and they find out where the stealing's going on, and they fire the manager or whoever's accountable for it. But who would have thought you could use the number from the Coke machine to figure out whether your other numbers might be close? net sales used parts, freight, and other sales. I always amaze people that don't measure their freight sales. Freight is a big deal nowadays. If you're small, it's still a big deal. And we always try to make a profit on freight. We published a guide for the salespeople to use for their freight, and we tried to make at least 10% on freight. In other words, meaning that if we charged our customers $10,000 this month to ship parts, we wanted to spend $9,000 shipping the parts. And $9,000 was after the returns. In other words, gross freight cost shouldn't be any more than freight sales. But if you don't measure freight sales, you don't know that. And it's a huge source of leakage. I'm always amazed at the yards that are charging for freight, but when they go and analyze the freight bills, they've got double in freight bills what they're really charging for freight. And again, if you don't measure that metric, you won't know. Number of parts vehicles bought, average cost of the vehicles, actual cost of the total vehicles, cost of sales projected. Don't know how many of you are doing this, but it's a really critical metric. And it's going to be one of the most critical ones going forward. We all know the single biggest expense we have is in buying cars. So you need to understand whether 50 cents worth of cars produces $1 in sales or $1.10 in sales, and what period of time, and which buyer. And so Pinnacle projects the sales. I don't know about AutoInfo and Hollander. Their systems are somewhat less sophisticated, but they do project the sales a little bit. But if your computer won't project your sales, it's okay. Ask the person buying the car to project the sales. Surely they figured out what the parts were going to be on the car, because shouldn't they have paid something that was relative to what the parts are? You put that in one of the fields in your computer records or in your auto records or whatever, and then come back, cycle back in some number of months, because if he said that he spent $10,000 on cars and they were going to produce $20,000 in sales, and they haven't produced 20, why? Which cars did or didn't? Sit down, go over the cars. What did he project versus what he got? Because then he can figure out the mistakes he's making on buying the cars. It's so critical. And you can compare the buyers to each other, and you can compare the auctions to each other. You know, some of the auctions you get really good deals at, and others you don't. Intuitively, you may know a little bit about that, but it would be nice if you could put a number to it. Average numbers of dismantlers, number of salespeople, average invoice. What is the average invoice? Sometimes you don't know what's right, but you know what's wrong, or you don't know what's wrong, but you know what's right. If everybody's average invoice is about the same and his is a whole lot less, why? What is he doing differently? Is he selling his parts too cheap? Is he focusing on the wrong kind of parts? Credit dollars. Sounds silly, but we need to track the credit dollars, and we need to know it by salespeople. Some of them have 35% in returns. Others have 5%. Sure would be nice if we could figure out how to solve that 35% in returns, maybe without firing the guy. Total dollars of projected sales for the period. And remember, I said we don't buy cars, we buy sales. Well, if you buy $20,000 worth of cars and the projected sales are 50, and you're trying to sell 70 this month, you're not going to make it. Your buyer has told you that he only bought $20,000 worth of cars, and you're only going to sell 50 off of them. Why are you trying to sell 70? You can't do it. So it lets you know whether you're buying enough. And sometimes salespeople get aggravated because they say we're not buying them enough cars. We can look at that number and show them that we bought enough cars to produce this many in sales. The not in stock. What percentage of the time did a customer ask for a part that you didn't have it? The computer systems track that in most cases. Total sales, obviously. Average cars per dismantler per day. The best yards are getting in the range of 2, and that's cradle to grave, meaning that the person that dismantles the car cleans the parts, puts the parts up, tags the parts, so on and so on. The worst yards are getting a half a car per day. And in a lot of cases, the person that dismantles the cars are not putting the parts up, or they're not washing the parts. It's that pay for performance thing. The guys the yards that have dismantlers that are getting 2 cars a day or about 10 cars a week, the dismantlers are making $1,000 a week. And they're in love. They don't want to go anywhere else, and you can't hire them. The others are making $600 a week, and they're doing 3 cars a week. And you think you're getting ahead, but you're not. You'd rather have a guy making $1,000 doing 10 than one making $600 doing 3. Sales per salesman, used in-stock parts. Sales per salesman, used in-stock plus brokered. total sales per salesperson, average sales per month per employee, all income, total labor dollars if you have labor. Well, I mean, you do have labor. And this is the single biggest metric, and I can give you a few benchmarks here. If you're above 30%, it's wrong. Now, I don't know what's right. Remember, sometimes you don't know what's right, but you know what's wrong. Above 30 is wrong. If your labor as a percentage of your sales is over 30, it's wrong. I can't tell you exactly what's wrong with it without doing more analysis, but I can tell you it's wrong. You can't make money with over 30% of your money going to pay people. If it's under 20, it's probably right. Everywhere in between is a variable. The average I see is probably 23 to 25%. Labor as a percentage of total sales. Brokered sales, again, you want to understand if they're going up. Warranty sales,